doing, everybody? We're in the bedroom today. This marks the start of a new series that I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to continue to do my other videos, but what I want to do is I want to start telling stories about the things that I know. I was thinking about the right word to use them, but just telling the stories about people that have been before and things that I probably can't say so much about in videos, probably because some of these places don't exist anymore. Even if I go to Oldham, you know, like the places are gone, there might be a faux car park there now or something like that. I'll tell you about this story. Right, I've spoke about this person before and I've laboured on about him in videos, and when I say his name you'll probably go, oh Sarah, come on. But honestly, you need to know about this person, everyone, because I didn't know as much as I'm going to tell you today. I had no clue. And like, up until... Well, let me start at the beginning. Back in... When I first started the channel, the very first video that I did, like, where I sort of actively went out and did a video to post to the channel, if you know what I mean. I did it on an iPad, and it was about 5 years ago. And if you go right back on the channel, 5 years, you'll see this video. And you know what, to this day, in terms of what the video is and what I tell you about Oldham's history, and it's all about Alexandra Park, and I literally do a tour of Alexandra Park, and it's like I think it's about an hour's long, and it was snowing and I had these disgusting pumps on, and I set off and I walked through, and the video itself is really, really low quality. I did it on my iPad, but it's all jiggly and everything. But it remains one of my favourite videos. And you know, it's interesting because I happened to watch it back about 6 months ago, and I'm sat there and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, it were me telling me things about Oldham, but things I'd forgot, you know. And the other interesting thing about it was, as we were going around the park, I was looking at like plaques and stuff. Specifically, is it called a pagoda? You know, that Chinese style structure. Well, on side of that are all these names like engraved, and at Old Boathouse as well, there's names engraved. And it was interesting because when I did the video, I didn't know where any of these people were, like none of them. And when I was watching the video back, and when I've been to park since, now I'm like, oh yeah, I know who Elijah Ribbit is. Oh yeah, I know who that is. Oh, I know who George Hanson is. I know who that is and that is and that and all the rest of it. And like, and I get that now all around. When I go to somewhere in Oldham, I'll see someone from Oldham's past. I'll see reference to the name. Researching Robert, there was loads of, we're talking about Robert today. Researching Robert, there was loads of stuff that I saw about him, which linked into other people in Oldham that I've featured on the channel, only in small bits. And it's interesting what I found out, and I just love Oldham's history. Anyhow, as I was going around Alexandra Park on this video, and I was looking at all of these names and other bits and pieces, I realised that I'd not spent that much time looking at this specific statue, and I'd been in the park so many times as a kid, as you do, and I think we'd clambered all over John Platt's statue at some point when we were kids, which we probably shouldn't have done, but we did. And was it the statue? No, it was the rock. We didn't clamber on the statue. You can't even climb up. It's massive. And the John Platt, we will definitely do John Platt at some point on the channel. But the other statue further up is Robert Ascroft. Now, Robert Ascroft, and this is where my story is beginning, everybody. I didn't know that much about Robert Ascroft at the time. I knew that there was an inscription on the front and it said, the worker's friend. And I thought, what does that mean, the worker's friend? Who is he? And I think I looked him up on the internet, and I got a tiny, tiny, tiny little snippet on the internet that basically said this person championed for workers' rights. And it didn't really go into much detail. And I remember I was searching around for information on him and I couldn't find any information. In terms of the statue itself, I found out was it was crowdfunded for public subscription, the same way that John Platt's was. John Platt further down, you'll be familiar with that one with the 4 graces around it. That one was by public subscription. I think that came out in 1895. Robert died in 1899, and I don't think his statue was opened until around about 1903. It was actually unveiled by Winston Churchill, and we'll go into Winston Churchill's friendship with Robert because that's relevant. But the statue itself, I remember the first time that I looked at it and I just thought, wow, his face looks real. It looks like he's alive. That's the first thing that I thought. He looks like he's alive. That's what I thought. It was so strange. And then I looked into who had made the statue, and it's F.W. Pomeroy. And for those of you who don't know F.W. Pomeroy, you'll definitely know who his statues are. He did a lot of, I think he did a lot of army, you know, like World War Two or World War One era stuff. I think he did a lot of that later on, and maybe I'm wrong on that. But one statue I know that he definitely made, just to give you an idea of the importance of this fella. You know the Old Bailey in London with the Lady Justice above it, and she's got her arms out with the scales and the sword? He created that statue. So that's the level of who this person was, Robert Ascroft. He was able, or they were able, to get someone like F.W. Pomeroy, absolutely stellar sculptor, to create a statue of him, and that's the statue that's in Alexandra Park now. And as I said, it was unveiled in 1904. But I'm going to start by telling you who Robert was, because since then, since I found all that out, I've managed to find out more information. So I've got more sources now, and I've managed to find out loads of information. And there's a couple of things that I want to tell you about that are really interesting, and some things that Robert did you won't even be aware of, but actually you take advantage of them to this day. So Robert Ascraft was born in Oldham in 1847, and his father was William, and he was a solicitor, an Oldham solicitor. I think his dad was also town clerk at one time, really important job. So yeah, William probably was always going to go in the steps of his father, and while he did start out his schooling in Oldham, I think he went to Hume Grammar for a while. He ended up going to this I think it was called Lancaster Grammar, and he went there and he finished his school there. And then when he came back to Oldham, he was accepted as a solicitor, and he began practice. And he had an office on Clegg Street. I think it was number 19 Clegg Street, the office. Now the interesting thing about that, I'm not even too sure if 19 Clegg Street is still up. I actually think it is. I think it's still there. I think it's the teeth place now. And it's interesting because you've got Ascroft Street at the side, which is, you know, links to him. And I'm pretty sure number 19, and I'm saying this now, but there's Ascroft Medical, and I think maybe that is where his office was. I think that might have been number 19. But the other thing about that is that house, because there were houses at one point, or the one next door, my mum used to clean there in the 80s, and I remember I used to go with her and my auntie Norma, and we used to go, and it was really old and really musky, and I think it was used as an accountant's at the time. It could have been a solicitor's, in fact it might have been a solicitor's. I'll have to ask my mum. I'll ask her and put a note in at the bottom here. But I just remember it. This is the weird thing about that building. I remember it being really old and like really scary, and it had like typewriters, and it had these leather like desks and stuff, and it was just really, 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 really old, everyone. And I can remember as a kid just walking around, and it's weird because occasionally I have this dream. I had this dream about being in that building, and walking up the stairs to the top and going into the attic, and it's the strangest thing. And whenever I have this dream, I go into the attic and there's all these things there, and there's always like an horrible feeling like something's in the attic with me, and I just want to come back down, but it's always in that building, and I don't know where it is. But I think that is ultimately where it was, or close by. Anyway, I'm going off subject. So yeah, he started as a solicitor, and he married Wilhelmina, which was his wife, and he had, I think, 2 or 3 children with her. Anyhow, he by the age of 23, he'd become it started with Oldham Town Council, and I believe at the time he was of a socialist background, which everyone was a socialist back in Oldham in the 1800s. Like John Platt was a very, very strong socialist. John Platt, managing director of Platt Brothers and what have you. You all know who John Platt is, or if you don't, I'll tell you in a future video. he started with the town council and he did various things for people around Oldham. But he was a solicitor for many years, and by all accounts he was a very good solicitor, and he did a lot to fight for people's rights across the board really. But he was more on the side of like employment rights and justice, you know, or fighting injustices for people. Anyway, by the time he became a member of Parliament for Oldham in 1895, which is when he was elected, and he would have been around about 46, 47 when he was elected to Parliament. If you look at the pictures that I'm putting in, and there's one picture I'm going to put in specifically where he stood outside Parliament, you should be looking at it now. It's just crazy to look at him now, look at him there and just think like he's probably in his late 40s. If you look at people in the late 40s now, they don't look like that, do they? Do you know what I mean? Like, he looks to me like an old man. You know, that's what he looks like to me. It's crazy. But yeah, he was in Parliament. He was elected to Oldham, and this is the interesting twist, everybody. He was a Conservative MP. A Conservative MP elected for MP for Oldham in the year 1894. You know, during his time as MP, you know what he did, Robert? He brought the Truckers' Bill. So I thought, what is the Truckers' Bill? Like, I've got no idea what the trucker or truck bill is. So I looked it up, and apparently in Oldham at that time, in the late 1800s, and this is a practice actually that I was aware of, but like I'd seen reference to this back in like ancient Egypt. So all the way up to like the late 1800s in Oldham, mill owners were practicing, or employers were practicing this. And what they'd do, you'd go work with them, and they'd pay you in tokens, and you'd get those tokens and you'd go to a company shop, and you get everything that you needed. So your food, your water, your food, your drink, your tea, your coffee, whatever. I mean, I don't know if you could get tea and coffee so readily back then, you know, as mill workers. I'm sure you could get a good cup of tea. But the point is, what used to happen is the mill owners would then say, well, there's your vouchers. Thanks for your work, grafting, from 6 in the morning till 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And people did. They'd run in the clogs, go and do a full day's graft, go home, you know, go to sleep, back up again, you know, 6, 7 days a week. It was ridiculous. And then they'd pay them in vouchers, and those vouchers could only be spent in the company shop. So it was like they had their own currency. Now, the positive for the employers, that was they were buying the goods cheap, and that money or those vouchers were coming back into the business, so they weren't having to pay real money, which people could then take away and use in other places. And Robert didn't like that, and he put the truck bill against to stop it. So if it wasn't for Robert Ascroft back then, maybe we wouldn't have a system now where actually we can demand actual real money for our wages. I mean, perhaps over the years that would have changed, but who knows? Who knows? He saw the injustice of it, and he was like, no, it's not right. You know, it's not right. That shouldn't be happening. Yeah, so the other one that he did was called Preferential Wages Bill. And basically what he would do is he said to these businesses in Oldham, right, or businesses across, any business that was associated with government, you know, like that the government would pay them to do certain things, he basically said to them, look after your workers and you'll get the contracts. It was a bit of a bribe, really, I suppose, if you look at it in that regard. But I think it was a way for them to sort of drive up quality. So like a lot of companies, like even nowadays, are getting government contract for this, that, the other. Robert was one who basically did that. So the other thing that Robert did is he, let me find out the name of it, excuse me, the Cotton Cloth Factories Act. That act was all about making sure that people who worked within cotton had safe places, you know, that they, maybe, I don't know, maybe they put shoes on the feet when they went to work. I mean, Oldhamers would go to work they'd take the clogs off and they'd work barefoot, you know, in these factories. He basically championed it, so like, you know, they were taking employees' welfare seriously. And in 1974, the government passed the Health and Safety Act, and it was Robert who championed the start of that. So actually, when you look at what he did, and if you look at what he's done for us now in modern times, we're talking, I mean, he died in 1899, everybody. He died young, he was only 51. Or was he 54? I'll be showing you his grave in a minute, which we'll see. But he died young. He died in 1899. He'd been in Parliament for 4 years. And he started feeling poorly one day. And there was people that said, like, he just used to run ragged round Parliament. Like, he was always going, like, 10 to a dozen, and, you know, he never really ate properly. He wouldn't stop. He was, like, always working on something. There was always someone asking him for something. It's interesting because I mentioned there was a link to Winston Churchill, which we'll talk about in a moment. And I've mentioned this before in several videos, but Robert actually was a mentor to Winston Churchill, because Winston Churchill started out his political career in Oldham. He was an MP for Oldham, was Winston. That was his first seat, who ended up being Conservative. But Robert was a Conservative. He was a Conservative MP over Oldham. And it's interesting, isn't it? You've got a man who did so much under that Conservative banner, and the town this day, no matter what, they will vote them Labour back in, and they'll vote them back in this time after everything that they've done, and they'll vote them back in, and that's what they'll do. They'll never ever give the Conservative or any other political party a look in. It just won't happen. Well, it certainly never happened in my lifetime, and I think it would take a seismic shift in order for it to happen in the future. Now listen, you don't know my politics, and I don't discuss my politics. I could be Labour, I could be Conservative, I could be Green Party, I could be anything, I could be nothing. But I do know this. Oldham's always had a Labour government, a Labour council, and I've not seen it getting any better. I've only seen it getting worse. So I don't know. I do know that when Robert was MP for Oldham, he was doing all of these wonderful things. He was doing all these fabulous things in government, making a real difference in people's lives. So much so that when he died, they erected a public subscription to raise a statue for him and place it in Alexandra Park, and it still stands there today. And I think people walk past it and they don't know who he was, they don't know what he did, they don't know the significance, and I didn't know the significance. I was, honest to God, I was absolutely blown away the other day when I saw all of this, and I was like, no way. Now I understand exactly why he's important. So I'd like to go back to my earlier point. I mentioned last week that I wanted to stop going to Oldham as often as I were doing, and that wasn't that often these days. And the reason why I've tailed off going to Oldham these days, and I mentioned this in this video which I took down because someone took offence, and I don't like offending people, but I just don't think Oldham's it's certainly not what it was, and I just think it's a real shame. I think it's a real shame that Oldham's got such a fabulous past, such a great history to talk about. So many good things came out of Oldham. Many good things came out of Oldham. You know, just look at this one example. Honestly, everyone, I can tell you loads of examples. We're literally just touching, we're not even scratching the surface here. I've got so many stories to tell you. Maybe I'll change the way that I tell the stories. You know me, I just like to tell you. I don't do scripts. I mean, I read that title, that thing, but I don't do scripts. I just tell you what's in my head, and I say what I think, and that's that. The reason why I don't want to go to Oldham anymore, everyone, is because I just can't do it anymore. And probably because I know so much about how great it used to be. You know, and the people of Oldham are still great, by the way. All people of Oldham, like, you know, it's not the people. The people are great, you know. It's the way that it's being managed. and it's not being managed correctly. And it seems to me that every decision that gets made, you know, structurally, let's knock this down, let's add that, let's do this, there's no beautiful buildings left. And the beautiful building, well, there's one or two beautiful buildings left, but they're fallen to pieces. Let's look at the Lyceum, built by the Platt brothers, fallen to pieces. Done a tour, I've seen it, it's leaking inside. Some areas of it that you just can't even go in, it's been condemned. It's a beautiful building. Why is it not being looked after? Let's look at the Prudential building, an architectural monument, literally an architectural monument, that Prudential building. It's crawling with rats and it's full of pigeons. Now, it was bought by Oldham Council. Since then, it's gone even worse. Apparently, they bought it to do it up. They'll level that and then they'll put something foul there. That's what they'll do. Let's look at another building. Let's look at the Telegraph building. So the local interest centre is in the old post office and telegraph building. And if you don't know where that is, I'll tell you. It's across the road from the Lyceum on the corner. And then you've got the old Methodist church, which used to be used as the Oldham local interest centre. It's got the two lions outside of it. It's on that corner. That building, beautiful, absolutely stunning building, left to rot. The Conservative building across the road, I don't even know if that is being used anymore. I say it's Conservative building. I shouldn't have called it the Conservative building. It's the Masons, the Masonic Lodge building. Incidentally, that building was, the architect was the same person that did Oldham Library. It's great to see that they're doing Oldham Library up, but they've just knocked down the Grand Theatre as well. So what I'm saying is, every time I go to Oldham, everybody, I can't continue to do it because I know so much about Oldham's history. You know, the fabulous, fabulous history of Oldham and the people that made it, like the Robert Ascrofts, like the John Platts, you know, all of those people. So I was just looking at the length of the video. I've been going on for a while now, haven't I? All of those people. And I just think it's a real shame that the town is being left to rot. And it's a real shame that no other political party gets a look in, I think. Because one of the phrases I was given years ago by one of my old bosses, if you always do what you've always done, you're always going to get what you've always got. So Oldham, if you always continue to do what you've done for the last 50 years that I've been alive, 49, whatever, and I've seen Oldham rot in that time, and it's not going to get any better. So maybe it's time for a change. Maybe go for a different direction, or perhaps harangue the council to start doing something good for the town, because it ain't going to get any better. And it's a shame we haven't got anyone like Robert Ascroft alive today that's willing to fight for Oldham and the people in Oldham that he did. And that's my view on that, everybody. So I hope you've enjoyed today's video. I hope you've enjoyed me being a bit more candid than I have done in previous videos. And let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.